Katrina, being the catastrophic level event that it was, forced us to start planning for very large-scale and catastrophic events. It changed the way not only FEMA, but the way the nation prepares for and responds to large-scale events.
We learned some very valuable lessons during Hurricane Katrina. The need for developing teams that specialize in this coordination, specialize in this unity of effort, to provide a single direction to all these different components that make up the response community during a major disaster.
Why are there still people of lower income families still living in their trailers?
It was the worst natural disaster that we had experienced. I think we will do better. The United States will do better the next time.
So we're driving around in New Orleans, and it's just really different for us and really interesting to see things that we've never seen before.
Protect yourself from the mud.
Watch out. The whole trailer is as big as probably my bedroom.
We really, really want to do something for them.
This is so exciting. We now have like the greatest surprise for this family.
All right, guys, here's our surprise.
Oh my God.
So we take her to the furniture store, and the look on her face is priceless.
So Universal Furniture and us are, kind of putting a little bit together, and we're donating furniture. So you can pick out whatever you want, and they'll hold it for you as long as you want until, your home is ready.
Thank you.
You are so welcome.
The mainstream media sought to carve out a definitive narrative that memorialized Katrina and New Orleans recovery as a story of success and American resilience, whilst choosing to ignore the racial and class divides that entrenched the trauma felt by New Orleans citizens, and not acknowledging the failure of the federal government to prepare an effective recovery response or the consequent inability to galvanize an effective reparative policy.
Despite multiple attempts to romanticize the relief effort of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans from mainstream media, news stations closer to the city depicted a less idealized version of events. Here, local news source NOLA exemplifies just one of the many crime stories that were bred in the chaotic aftermath as a result of the government's dormancy in the face of the storm.
As evident, there was a plethora of tragedy and despair that went neglected by most of the nation's media. These are examples from April 2016 highlighting the ongoing issues, not just in the immediacy after the storm.
There is a drought of images in the media that can truly represent these statistics and facts. Consequently, we've taken away all visuals to highlight our point that race and class were not brought to light in the media in the aftermath of Katrina.
Scratch the surface of the mainstream's narrative of Katrina, and chaos and clear lack of any real official structure becomes evident. Outlets like Democracy Now!, an independent news program, look to explore a more authentic perspective of what it meant to be living in New Orleans after the hurricane. In the following clip, the lack of structure is appallingly apparent, with none of the federal powers willing to accept responsibility of removing a dead body. Not only is there a breakdown of societal norms of treating a dead body with respect, but left to rot in the blazing New Orleans sun. The health impacts are obviously detrimental. This kind of imagery that is left for survivors to view daily only served as a symbol of how they appeared to be abandoned by the rest of the nation.
And lifted up a sheet of corrugated metal marked with an X, revealing the dead body underneath.
Now, his body been here for almost 2 weeks, 2 weeks tomorrow. All right, that this man body been laying here.
As Malik Rahim was speaking, every level of authority he mentioned drove by. There's a dead body right here. Can you guys pick it up?
I don't think we can pick it up, but we can call the local authorities to come and pick it up.
There's a dead body right here. Can Louisiana State Troopers, can you pick it up?
You need to talk to our public information officer, ma'am.
It's been here for 2 weeks. We're looking right over at it right there.
You need to talk to our public information officer. You can contact them at the troop.
Your name is?
You need to talk to our public information officer.
Do you know what they should do to get this body removed?
I have no idea. I can't tell you. I don't know.
Comparatively, this image shows what appears to be a makeshift grave on a piece of cardboard. Regardless of federal agencies allowing a breakdown of societal taboos, it was the people of New Orleans who sought to keep and create order. Ironically, the media chose to demonize the victims as criminals and thugs. Samuel R. Summer writes, "One story emphasized in the days after Katrina's landfall was the outbreak of violent crime throughout New Orleans. However, many of these stories did not happen at all, or not at least to the extent the public were led to believe."
This demonization of victims is contrasted by a September 2005 discussion on This American Life radio show with Denise Moore, a survivor of the storm in New Orleans Convention Center. She describes how an armed gang from local neighborhoods were in fact the people doing the most to ensure the safety and well-being of victims, taking goods from stores to provide the food and drink that official forces were just not.
There were men just kind of like roaming with guns, packs of men, and
They were securing the area. Criminals. These guys were criminals. They were. These guys got together, figured out who had guns, and decided they were going to make sure that no women were getting raped, hurting babies, and nobody was hurting these old people. They were the ones getting juice for the babies. They were the ones getting clothes for people who had walked through that water.
Despite testimonies from actual victims like Moore, newspapers chose to report victims in a very different way, with a notable difference in how survivors of differing races were portrayed. Peggy Noonan's article shows an alarming lack of empathy to victims and displays intense vitriol in her wish for perceived looters to be punished. She describes the actions of many looters as tragic pigism and expresses hope that the looters are shot. She uses several terms to lay out her preferred means of coping with the storm, hoping for morality and goodness.
These two contrasting views of looters suggest that meanings of morality and goodness were turned on their heads. Many of the unlawful individuals were getting essentials to victims, while the essentially good federal forces turned a blind eye to people's needs. This demonization of people who broke the law to help others could be partially down to the embarrassment of the American government and their own lack of a coherent relief effort, shown up by supposed criminals. The locals upheld society, while federal forces did not, yet it is the locals that are painted as animals.
Importantly, this demonization of victims seemed to be racially driven. Much controversy arose around the captioning of an image of white victims as finding food and an almost identical image of a black man as looting. Associated Press's then director of photography reportedly stated that captions for the images are discussed between editors and photographers. His defense suggests a narrow way of determining captions, as if you're just unlucky if you happen to be near a store when your picture is taken. It further suggests an ignorance of public perceptions and how captions can play a role in perpetuating racial and class stereotypes of criminality. Interestingly, the photographers were unavailable for comment, suggesting an avoidance of blame, similarly to the officials in Democracy Now! Clip. No one is able to entirely articulate the reality of the suffering of Katrina victims or how deep-seated associations of race and class only exacerbate a lack of viewer sympathy for the already limited coverage of poorer survivors.
The media further came under scrutiny for their problematic use of the term refugee when describing victims. Less than a week after the storm, Reverend Jesse Jackson criticised the use of the term during an NBC interview and went on to compare federal responses between Katrina and 9/11. His condemnation exemplifies the power of language and the way in which words like refugee render victims, especially African Americans, as others of secondary importance.
Jackson. Good to talk to you. Point one, we are not refugees. That itself is racist language. We are American citizens. We are not refugees. The citizens who have not been well served by our government. When there was a hit in 9/11, Mr. Bush was there in 2 days embracing police and firemen. He got there yesterday in New Orleans and did not stop in the point of crisis and did a ceremonial tour. There is a sense in which people feel that watching these 5 or 6 days of suffering without food and water is likened into being in the hull of a slave ship.
While calls were soon made to refrain from use of the term in media, the tendency has seemingly not abated. In a talk with Hollywood Reporter, Ryan Murphy, an executive producer of the American Crime Story anthology television series, discusses how the second season is due to focus on Katrina and the institutional racism of federal forces.
Vanity Fair directly quotes this in their article, but Cinema Blend rewords the statement to include the term refugee to describe victims, with the remainder of the sentence employing language that makes their plight feel like a noble struggle, downplaying the brutal reality that many New Orleans survivors faced. The most striking element of this rewording is that the editors, whether consciously or unconsciously, chose to insert the refugee term, suggesting that even after 10 years, the associations made based around race and class remain in American media.
A good deal of mainstream American media has attempted to construct a narrative surrounding Hurricane Katrina that frames it as a tale of American resilience in the face of a purely natural disaster. The issue with this is that such a narrative obscures. Cashin discusses how Katrina and her aftermath were demonstrative of how our relations have been shaped by the physical organisation of the American metropolis and how our physical organisation has shaped our race relations. Many of the examples used in this video explore and expose the ugly reality of the plights faced by victims on a daily basis, be it lack of federal assurance, being demonised or framed as an other through popular terminology, or brushed aside by assurances that we will do better next time, as shown in our opening clips. The lessons learned from the inadequate federal response have evidently not been in the interest of acknowledging the terrible times faced by impoverished citizens in New Orleans. To allow them more spotlight would disrupt the lighter narrative, and various officials would have to accept part of the blame. And if these examples have shown anything, few seem willing to do so.
You need to talk to our public information officer